The nights were endless, stretching on like a punishment. Darkness pressed against the mouths of caves where small bands of humans huddled together, their bodies serving as the only warmth against the cruel bite of the wind. Every breath rose, in pale clouds, fading quickly into the black void above them. There was no comfort in this darkness, only waiting for morning, waiting for the chill to pass, waiting to see who among them might not survive the night. Beyond the cave walls, the world was alive with threats. A low growl carried through the trees could mean a predator had caught their scent. The crack of a branch might signal danger moving closer. With no fire to hold the beasts at bay, every sound in the night was a warning, every shadow a possible death sentence. Food rotted quickly in the damp and the cold. The meat of a hunt, so hard won, spoiled before it could be eaten. Illness spread through the group unchecked, as raw flesh carried unseen sickness into fragile bodies. There was no warmth to heal the weak, no light to tend to wounds. Life was not planned in years, not even in season survival, was a desperate, fragile endurance measured one day at a time. This was humanity before fire, vulnerable, fragile, and endlessly at the mercy of the world around them. A species caught between intelligence and helplessness, still searching for the spark that would one day turn fear into power. Cold gnawed at their bones long before winter arrived. Each night without fire drained the strength they needed for the hunt, leaving bodies stiff and weary by dawn. Hunger followed close behind, a constant shadow. Raw meat was their only feast, yet it carried its own dangers, parasites unseen. Sickness that spread quickly through the fragile bands of early humans. Roots and bitter berries offered some relief, but never enough. They filled the stomach yet starved the body of strength. Their stone tools brought small victories, slicing through hides, scraping marrow from bones. But they could not keep the wolves away, nor the big cats that stalked the darkness, waiting for weakness. To live without fire was not to live at all, it was endurance on the edge of death. A battle fought one breath at a time. Across the horizon, storms tore open the sky, and with each strike of lightning, the world lit up in sudden, blinding flashes. Dry forests caught like tinder, erupting into walls of flame that consumed everything in their path. Far from safety, early humans stood frozen, watching rivers of fire pour from volcanic mountains, their glow staining the night red. The wind carried sparks that leapt across the land, scattering burning branches into the open plains. To them, this light was both promise and peril. It chased away the predators lurking in the dark, yet it could reduce their world to ash in moments. They dared not touch it, yet could not look away. In that tension, fear tangled with fascination, curiosity was born, a question to dangerous, to ignore. Driven by hunger and the chill of endless nights. A small band of hunters dares to do what none before them had tried. The storm has passed, leaving behind a forest scarred and smoldering. Among the ash lies a single burning branch, its glow pulsing in the wind like the breath of some living spirit. The group hesitates, their hearts pounding, their eyes locked on the fire as if it were a predator itself. One hunter steps forward. He reaches out, flinches from the heat, then steadies himself. His hand trembles, not just from fear, but from possibility. In this fragile moment, humanity edges closer to its destiny, fear bending to curiosity, survival giving way to discovery. At first, fire was nothing but terror, a force that devoured forests and scorched the earth. But as the hunters linger near the fading embers, something shifts. They notice that while the flames rage, no predator dares to draw near. The night feels less suffocating, less haunted by glowing eyes in the dark. Carefully, they edge closer. The warmth brushes their skin, a comfort unknown in the freezing winds. Pain and fascination mix as they watch the glow dance and flicker. It is dangerous, yes, but also alive with promise. For the first time, fire is not just destruction. It becomes a question, a mystery, and in that spark of curiosity, humanity begins to dream of mastery. Storms raged across the ancient world, their fury splitting trees and igniting the land. In the silence that followed, towering pillars of fire clawed at the sky, crackling with a power beyond comprehension. Early humans watched from the shadows, torn between terror and temptation. To step too close was to risk death, yet to turn away was to surrender the chance at warmth, at safety, at something more than survival. Hunger and cold pressed them forward. Inch by inch, they crept toward the flames, not to master them, but to steal from them. A single branch, glowing and alive, was carried back to their shelter. Humanity's first theft of fire from the hands of nature itself. The fire was alive, but fragile. In their hands, it hissed and spat, eager to vanish with the wind or rain. Early attempts to hold it were clumsy, marked by burns on skin and the acrid smell of singed hair. Branches flared too quickly, collapsing into ash before they could be carried far. Yet from each painful failure, knowledge slowly formed. They learned to cradle glowing embers in bundles of dry leaves, to shield them from the breeze, and to breathe life back into dying sparks with careful blows. Carrying fire became more than survival. It was a sacred duty. One ember meant warmth, light, and safety. To lose it was disaster. To protect it was honor. Keeping fire alive was a battle of patience and fear. A sudden gust could snuff it out. A single downpour could erase days of safety. The flame had to be fed, watched, and guarded like a living creature. Yet it was fragile, always threatening to vanish. When it did, desperation drove tribes back to burning forests or storm-scorched plains, where the hunt for new fire meant risking teeth and claws in the shadows. Some sought stability near volcanic lands, where fire was constant, but the earth itself was dangerous. Fire was not yet a servant. It was a temperamental companion, testing humanity's will to endure. When disaster struck, fire became more than warmth or light. It became the heartbeat of the tribe. A sudden storm could send families scrambling into the dark. Yet a few clung desperately to burning sticks, shielding them with arms and bodies. Even at the cost of scorched skin, those embers were not just heat. They were survival, the fragile, lying between safety and despair. Each flame carried meaning. To lose it was to return to hunger, to cold, to terror. To protect it was to carry the tribe's future. Fire turned into a treasure worth fighting for. so precious that rival clans clashed not for meat or water, but for the right to hold it. Glow. Fire slowly transformed from a fragile prize into something sacred, a legacy carried through generations. Elders gathered the young around the glowing hearth, showing them how to stack twigs just right, how to shield embers from the wind, how to breathe life back into dying coals. These lessons were not written, but lived, passed through careful hands and watchful eyes. To hold the flame was to hold the tribe's identity. It bound families together, linking the living to their ancestors who first dared to touch its light. Yet even with this mastery of care, humans were still only borrowers. Every blaze traced back to nature's fury, and so the question lingered. Could fire be summoned by human will alone? Perhaps it began as an accident. A stone struck against another during toolmaking, and for the briefest moment, a spark leapt into the air, or maybe a branch, twisted and rubbed in desperation, gave off a faint wisp of smoke before dying away. Early humans had seen fire born from lightning and lava, but this was different. It came from their own hands. The sparks were fleeting, the smoke elusive. Most attempts ended in nothing, yet the memory lingered. If the earth could give fire, perhaps so could they. Curiosity hardened into determination. Tribes began to test, to scrape, to grind, to coax flame from stubborn materials. Every failure was fuel for the next attempt, and in that persistence, humanity took its first true step toward creation. The path to creation was nothing short of brutal. Hands blistered and bled from endless hours of rubbing sticks together. Muscles ached from grinding stone against stone, and lungs filled with smoke that promised flame but dissolved into nothing. Sparks leapt into the air only to vanish in the wind, mocking their struggle. Every failed attempt carried the sting of defeat. Yet within that frustration lay the first flicker of possibility. Around campfires stolen from storms, stories began to spread tales of the hunter who nearly coaxed flame from dry wood, of the wanderer whose stones sang with sparks. These failures were not forgotten. They became lessons. Slowly, the pieces of knowledge grew. Which rocks struck fire, which woods crumbled to embers, which tinder whispered to flame. What began as frustration became ritual. Creation demanded patience, endurance, and focus. Each sparkless strike was no longer wasted, it was a step forward. For the first time, humanity's survival was not only shaped by instinct, but by invention. Then, at last, came the turning point. A spark leapt from stone to tinder, clung to a wisp of dry grass, and breathed itself into smoke for a heartbeat. The air held still until the first fragile flame flickered alive. This was no wildfire born of storms, no inferno from the mouth of a volcano. This was fire called forth by human hands. The tribe froze, as though the earth itself had shifted beneath them. Their eyes widened in silence, torn between terror and wonder. Could this dangerous light truly belong to them? The flame quivered, then grew, stretching shadows across the walls of their shelter. In that moment, fear gave way to joy. Laughter broke loose, tears spilled, voices rose. This was more than warmth, more than light. It was the first spark of invention, and it changed humanity forever. Those who could summon sparks rose to a place no one had held before. Around them, others gathered in awe, for what they did seemed less like skill and more like magic. To draw fire from stone or wood was to touch something unseen, something beyond the reach of ordinary hunters and foragers. Soon, firemakers were no longer just survivors. They became guardians of a power that fed the tribe, shielded them from predators, and lit their nights with possibility. They taught, they guided, they carried secrets forward like treasures passed between generations, dot in their hands. Knowledge itself became wealth. Respect turned into responsibility, and with it, the first outlines of leadership appeared. Fire did not only change how humans lived, it reshaped how they followed, trusted, and believed. From that turning point, humanity stepped onto a new path. No longer did tribes wait for lightning to strike or lava to spill from a mountain's heart. With their own hands, they could summon flame whenever survival demanded it. The fear of endless, frozen nights began to fade. Darkness was no longer absolute, for fire pushed it back, giving safety where once only terror dwelled. Meals grew richer, safer, and more nourishing. Flames unlocked flavors and strength hidden in food, protecting tribes from sickness that raw flesh once carried. Fire warmed the weak and the old, letting families survive winters that would have killed them before. It stretched the boundaries of where humans could live, turning icy landscapes into homes. Yet the true change ran deeper than warmth or hunger. Fire altered how humans saw themselves. For the first time, they were not just enduring nature's wrath, but mastering a piece of it. The flame was no longer a fleeting gift stolen from the wild. It was theirs to keep, to share, to guard. In that moment, invention was born. The spark of fire became the spark of human progress, a light that would never go out. Before fire, nightfall was a sentence of terror. As the sun dipped, shadows swallowed the land, and humans shrank back into caves, clinging to one another. In the silence, eyes gleamed from the undergrowth, silent watchers, predators waiting for weakness. Wolves padded through the dark. Lions and hyenas prowled near the edges of camps. To be human in that time was to live small in the face of overwhelming danger, every night a battle of endurance. But then fire came. Flames rose at cave mouths, their roar echoing into the night. Predators hesitated. Where once there had been trembling silence, there was now a barrier of light, a weapon made not of bone or stone, but of heat and fear. The crackle of wood became more than noise, it became a shield. For the first time, families could close their eyes without terror gripping their chests. Children slept under the warm glow. Parents watched the shadows flicker, knowing the flame pushed danger back. Darkness was no longer an enemy. This was not just survival, it was transformation. Fire turned night from a time of fear into a time of gathering. Within its circle of light, humanity claimed the dark as its own. With fear pushed back by the glow of the fire, curiosity soon followed. No longer confined to keeping flames at the edge of camp, early humans began to wonder what else this living force could do. Slowly, fire was lifted from the hearth and carried into the wild. Torches, simple branches set ablaze, became weapons of light against the darkness. Predators that once prowled boldly now retreated when confronted by a wall of flame held high in human hands. But the power of fire went beyond defense. Hunters discovered that its heat and smoke could drive animals from their hiding places. Flames swept through tall grass, flushing prey into the open, where waiting spears ended the chase. Hunting parties that once relied on stealth and luck now had strategy. Fire became not just protection, but participation in the hunt itself. This was a turning point. Fire was no longer only a guardian at night, it was a partner in survival. By wielding it deliberately, humans began to bend the natural world to their advantage, claiming a new level of control over land and beast alike. The flame was becoming a tool of conquest. What began as survival soon became rivalry. Fire, once a fragile discovery, had transformed into the lifeblood of every community. Tribes that possessed it could cook their food, drive away predators, and warm themselves against the cold. Those without it were left exposed, hungry, and afraid. The flame was more than heat, it was security. And in a world of constant struggle, that security was worth fighting for. Raids erupted not for meat or hides, but for glowing embers carried in clay, bark, or stone. To steal another tribe's fire was to strip them of safety. To cast them back into the shadows, to lose it meant desperation, nights of shivering, and the gnawing fear of predators closing in. Fire had become both treasure and weapon, a force that could unite a tribe or leave it broken. This was the moment when technology first shaped human conflict. Fire was no longer just survival. It was power, and in the flicker of every flame, the first sparks of dominance and rivalry were born. Picture a night with no stars, no moon, only the faint glow of firelight on the horizon. In the stillness, a band of raiders moves like shadows, closing in on a rival camp. Their goal is not food or land, but the very heart of survival itself. The flames dot suddenly. Chaos bursts into the night. Shouts echo as defenders spring awake, clutching spears and stones. Raiders hurl water, sand, even cloaks to smother the fire. Sparks scatter, smoke rises, and the blaze shrinks under the assault. For those inside the camp, every breath is panic, every heartbeat a plea to keep the fire alive. When the flames die, silence follows. It is not triumph that fills the air, but dread. The defeated stare into darkness, knowing they are no longer safe. Without fire, their world collapses into cold, hunger, and fear of unseen predators. These raids revealed a hard truth. Fire was not just a gift of warmth and light. It was a weapon one tribe's salvation could become another's ruin. In its glow, humanity discovered both protection and peril. A reminder that every spark carried the weight of power. Fire was no longer just heat and light. It became a banner of power, a symbol of who held strength and who did not. Around its glow, humans drew closer, weaving the first threads of community. The circle of firelight was not only a place to cook or rest, it was where stories were told, trust was built, and identity began to form. But beyond that circle, darkness lingered. Rivals watched, knowing that whoever held fire held the advantage. It could unite a tribe, but it could just as easily divide tribes against one another. Its presence meant triumph. Its absence, despair. In fire, humanity found its first true symbol of control over the night, over nature, and over each other. The flame was not just survival, it was destiny. It may have begun with an accident. A strip of raw meat, slick with fat, slipped from someone's grasp and landed in the flames. Instead of being spoiled, it released a fragrance that stopped the tribe in their tracks. Rich, smoky, unlike anything they had ever known. Hunger and caution wrestled in their minds, but curiosity won. They tasted it. The flesh was tender, easier to chew, and most astonishingly, it did not bring the sickness that raw meat so often carried. What began as hesitation turned into experimentation. Roots blackened at the edges, grains popped, tubers softened. Each trial brought new flavors and new strength. In that moment, fire ceased to be only a guardian. It became a partner. The first true feast had been found, and with it, the future of humanity began to change. Cooking was more than convenience. It was revolution. Raw food, fibrous and teeming with hidden dangers, demanded endless chewing and carried the constant risk of sickness. But fire transformed it. Flesh softened, plants broke down, toxins burned away. Every bite became easier, safer, richer in energy. This energy was more than survival fuel. It was power for growth. Freed from the burden of grinding down raw meals, the human body shifted its resources. Muscles worked less, while brains expanded more. Anthropologists believe this was the spark that gave rise to memory, imagination, and speech. Around the fire, hunts turned into feasts, and feasts into progress. With every roasted root and sizzling cut of meat, humanity's mind was quietly being forged. Before fire, eating was scattered, solitary, and hurried, scraps torn in silence, chewed raw before. Predators could close in, but with cooking came something new. A reason to stop, to wait, to gather. The hearth was not just a tool for food. It was a signal, drawing people into its circle of warmth and light. Here, meals were no longer stolen moments of survival. They became rituals. The fire became a center where food was prepared, divided, and shared. In its glow, people rested together, spoke together, remembered together around those flames. Stories were born, traditions took root, lessons were passed down. Fire had given humanity more than nourishment. It had given them a place to belong. Fire had always been a force of survival, but soon it became something more. Its glow was unlike the steady light of the moon or the distant shimmer of stars. It moved, it breathed, it consumed. To early humans, the flame was alive. Tribes began to treat it with reverence. Around the fire, ceremonies unfolded, hands lifted in offering, songs rising with the smoke. Meat, grain, or bone were cast into the embers, given back as gifts to whatever unseen power had shared this force with humankind. Stories spread across generations, some told of fire, stolen from the heavens, others of divine beings who placed it in human hands. In every version, fire was more than warmth. It was spirit, mystery, and life itself. a bridge between the earthly and the eternal. By the time fire was no longer a fragile discovery, but a trusted companion, it had woven itself into every corner of human life. It warmed cold nights, transformed food into nourishment, and carried a glow that reached far beyond the practical. The hearth became the first true center of society. Here, people did more than eat. They thought, they remembered, they dreamed. Fire was the stage for language to grow, for myths to be told, for bonds to deepen. Its light was both comfort and inspiration, turning survival into something larger, something human. In its flames, humanity found its first story, not of the beasts they feared or the land they crossed, but of themselves, shaping a world with fire at its heart. The frozen winds once marked the edge of possibility. Beyond them lay lands where breath turned to mist and nights stretched endlessly under a silent, star-choked sky. For most creatures, these regions were a graveyard of ice and hunger. But for early humans, armed with fire, they became a new frontier. The flame was their shield against the cold, a warmth that wrapped fragile bodies in defiance of the frost. In caves and rough shelters, hearths glowed like beating hearts, keeping death at bay. Hunters trudged across snow-laden plains, torches in hand, their shadows dancing across white drifts as they tracked mammoth and bison. Here, fire was more than survival. It was conquest. Neanderthals had strength, predators had fangs, but humans had a force neither muscle nor fur could match. With fire, the ice no longer marked an end. It became the beginning of expansion, the widening of the human world. The flame that once flickered only for warmth soon revealed another gift. A sharpened stick passed through fire, grew harder, stronger, and more deadly in the hunt. Spears that once splintered against the hide of great beasts could now pierce with precision. The campfire, once a circle of safety, began to whisper of possibilities beyond survival. Clay, pressed from riverbanks, hardened in the heat, transforming into vessels that could hold water, grains, or seeds. What had been fragile became lasting, and with it came security. Around these fires, people experimented, placing stones in embers, only to find them softening, shaping, and cooling into edges sharper than before. By 6000 BCE, flames were bending metal itself, copper, and later bronze, poured from the fire's grasp, remade by human hands. What began as chance discovery had become deliberate craft. The hearth was no longer just a fire. It was humanity's first workshop. The flames that once flickered in caves grew into forces that reshaped entire landscapes. No longer confined to the hearth, fire was carried into the open, unleashed in sweeping burns across forests and grasslands. What seemed like destruction was, in truth, creation. Ash sank into the earth, rich and fertile, allowing crops to thrive where only wild thickets had stood before. With this knowledge, humans no longer wandered endlessly in search of food. They could shape the land itself. Villages rose where forests had fallen, anchored by fields of grain and the steady glow of hearths. Fire-fueled kilns that hardened clay into durable pottery, ovens that baked the first bread, and furnaces that coaxed metal into form. Each flame carried forward a new step in the human story. It was no longer just survival at stake, but the building of permanence. Fire, once feared, had become the engine of civilization itself. Fire had crossed a threshold. What began as borrowed light from lightning strikes and wild infernos was now something only humans could bend to their will. No other creature could summon it, protect it, or command it. This was the Great Divide, a force that set humanity apart from every rival that once roamed the earth. While predators relied on claw and fang, humans carried a weapon that could both destroy and protect, a shield against the night and a torch guiding them forward in its glow. The boundaries of life expanded. Meals no longer carried the same risk of disease. Nights stretched longer, filled with talk, planning, and teaching. Around the fire, memories became stories, and stories became knowledge that survived beyond a single lifetime. Neanderthals, who shared the cold and the hunt, slowly disappeared. But humans endured, not because they were stronger, but because they held fire in their hands. It was more than survival. It was creation, from the first stolen embers clutched in trembling hands to the roaring furnaces that lit the skies of ancient empires. Fire has been the silent witness to humanity's rise. Each spark told the same story, survival giving way to invention, invention giving way to civilization. In the glow of village hearths, meals were shared and families bound together. In the searing heat of bronze and iron forges, weapons and tools reshaped the balance of power. And in the blaze of torches carried through city streets, rituals, politics, and dreams found their stage. The trail of fire leads all the way to the present, to the engines that drive industry, the power plants that light our homes, the cities that shine like constellations on Earth's surface. Civilization itself is built on the memory of flame. As humans stare into the glow today, the reflection is the same as it was millennia ago. Not only warmth, not only light, but the power to imagine tomorrow. Fire was never just a discovery. It was humanity's first step toward becoming architects of the future.